She had been starving for days, but the first thing she asked for was not food. It was for someone to open the door. Rain whispered across the cracked parking lot of the Desert Star Motel outside Amarillo, turning the pavement black beneath a flickering red neon sign. Staff Sergeant Nathan Cole had just stepped out of his truck when he saw her lying beside the ice machine, half hidden in shadow. The German Shepherd was thin enough that the line of her ribs showed beneath her wet black and tan coat. One ear stood upright. The other leaned slightly to the side, heavy with exhaustion. A faded leather collar circled her neck, and from it hung an old brass motel key attached to a red plastic tag. Room 17. Nathan stopped beneath the weak yellow light outside the office. The dog lifted her head. Her amber eyes found him at once, alert despite the tremor running through her body. She did not growl. She did not try to run. She only watched him with the patience of something that had already spent too long waiting. Nathan took one slow step forward. Easy, girl. The wind carried the smell of wet asphalt, old cigarette smoke, and dust from the highway. Somewhere beyond the motel, a freight train called across the dark plains. The shepherd struggled to stand. Her front legs held for a moment, then shook beneath her. Nathan lowered himself several feet away, careful not to crowd her. He reached into the truck, found an unopened bottle of water, and poured some into the clean lid of a plastic storage container. He set it on the ground and moved back. The dog looked at the water. Then she turned her head toward the long row of motel rooms. Nathan followed her gaze. Most of the doors were dark. A blue television glow leaked through one curtain. Near the far end of the second-floor walkway, a single porch light burned above room 17. The German Shepherd rose again. This time, she made it 3 steps before pausing. The key struck softly against her collar. Metal against metal. A small, steady sound. She looked back at Nathan, then continued toward the stairs. You should drink first, he said. She ignored the water. Nathan had known Marines with that same kind of focus. Men who could carry pain quietly as long as there was still a task unfinished. He followed her across the parking lot. Each step seemed to cost her something, but she kept moving. At the stairs, Nathan reached toward her, thinking he might carry her. She flinched away, not from fear of him, but from fear of being stopped. So he stayed beside her instead. One step, then another. Rain gathered along the railing and fell in slow drops to the pavement below. At the top, the shepherd walked directly past rooms 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. She did not hesitate until she reached the last door. Room 17. The porch light buzzed overhead. A paper notice had been taped across the frame. Office access only. The dog lowered her nose to the bottom of the door and breathed in deeply. Then she sat. Nathan looked at the key hanging from her collar. The number matched. Is this where you belong? He asked. The shepherd raised one paw and touched the door. Once. Gently. No scratching. No panic. Just a quiet request. Nathan reached for the office phone number printed on the notice, but before he could unlock his screen, the dog swayed. He moved forward and caught her as her legs folded beneath her. She was lighter than she should have been. Her wet fur pressed cold against his arms, but even as her strength faded, she turned her head toward the lock. Nathan held her close and looked at the brass key resting against his sleeve. Room 17 had been closed. The dog had not left, and whatever waited behind that door had kept her alive long enough to bring someone there. Several hours earlier, Nathan Cole had been driving west across the Texas Panhandle with the heater running low and the radio turned off. The highway stretched straight beneath a wide gray sky, bordered by flat fields, distant grain elevators, and fences that seemed to disappear into the horizon. He had left Camp Pendleton 2 days before with everything he owned packed into the bed of his truck: one duffel bag, a metal toolbox, 3 folded uniforms, and a cardboard box he had not opened since his mother died. At 39, Nathan still carried the posture of a Marine, tall, broad-shouldered, and disciplined even when no one was watching. His dark brown hair was cut short. His fair skin had been roughened by years of sun and wind, and his blue-gray eyes rarely stayed on one thing for long. He scanned mirrors, exits, overpasses, and shoulders out of habit. What he avoided was the phone resting face down in the cup holder. His younger brother, Daniel, had called twice that morning. Nathan had let both calls go unanswered. There was no argument between them, not exactly. Only months of silence built from things neither knew how to say. Daniel wanted him to come home to North Carolina and help clear their mother's house. Nathan kept finding reasons to delay. Weather, traffic, paperwork. The truth was simpler. Home was where her voice still lived in every room, and Nathan had already failed one goodbye there. During her final week in the hospital, she had asked him to return before evening. He had promised. Then a meeting ran late, a flight was canceled, and Nathan convinced himself there would be more time. There was not. Since then, he had become skilled at leaving before any place could ask him to stay. He stopped only for gas, coffee, and sleep. Cheap motels suited him. No names remembered. No questions asked. By dusk, the wind had strengthened, pushing dust across the road in pale waves. Rain followed near Amarillo, sudden and cold, striking the windshield hard enough to blur the lane markers. Nathan saw the Desert Star Motel sign glowing through the weather and turned off without thinking. The place sat beside an old frontage road, 2 stories of faded stucco wrapped around a mostly empty parking lot. The red neon star above the office flickered between bright and dim. Nathan parked beneath the second-floor walkway and checked the time. He planned to sleep 5 hours, leave before sunrise, and keep moving east. Inside the office, a woman in her 40s sat behind a scratched counter reading a paperback. Her name tag said Diane Miller. She looked up when he entered, taking in the olive field jacket, the travel-worn boots, and the controlled stillness that military service left behind. One night, she asked, "That is the plan." Diane slid a registration card toward him. Storm might last until morning. Nathan signed without comment. She handed him a plastic key card for room 8 and nodded toward the vending machines. Ice machine works when it feels like it. Coffee starts at 5. Nathan thanked her and stepped back into the rain. He had taken only 3 steps toward his room when something moved beside the ice machine. At first, he thought it was a wet blanket caught in the wind. Then 2 amber eyes lifted from the shadow, and a brass key tapped softly against a leather collar. Nathan knelt beside the German Shepherd and held the water close enough for her to smell, but not close enough to make her feel trapped. For several seconds, she watched him instead of the bowl. Rain ticked against the metal housing of the ice machine. The motel's red sign buzzed overhead, turning the puddles around them the color of rust. "You can decide," he said quietly. The dog lowered her head at last and drank. Not much, just enough to steady herself. Nathan opened the paper bag from the vending area and placed a few pieces of plain turkey near the bowl. She sniffed them, then looked toward the second-floor walkway. Her amber eyes fixed on the last door beneath the porch light. Room 17. Nathan followed her gaze. The key hanging from her collar swung once and tapped the metal tag beneath it. 17. The dog rose slowly, took the food in her mouth, and began walking across the parking lot. Nathan stood and followed. She did not eat. She carried it. At the bottom of the stairs, she paused until he came closer, then climbed 1 step at a time. Nathan stayed beside her, ready to catch her if her legs failed. The walkway smelled of rain, cleaning solution, and old carpet from the rooms behind closed doors. The shepherd passed every door without hesitation. When she reached room 17, she placed the turkey on the concrete and sat beside it. Then she looked at Nathan. "You brought it here," he said. Her ears lifted at the sound of his voice. Nathan crouched and examined the key. It was an old brass motel key, the kind most places had stopped using years ago, attached to a red diamond-shaped tag. The numbers were worn but clear. Room 17. The lock on the door was newer than the key, but beneath the modern card reader sat an old keyhole, sealed around the edges with cracked paint. Nathan glanced toward the office. Diane stood behind the window watching them. A moment later, she stepped outside beneath an umbrella and crossed the lot. "That dog has been hanging around for days," she said. "Every time I try to get close, she disappears." Nathan looked at the shepherd. She did not disappear. Diane followed his eyes to the door. Her expression changed when she saw the key. Where did she get that? Around her neck. Diane climbed the stairs and stopped a few feet away. Room 17 has been locked since the last guest vanished. Vanished. Left without checking out. At least, that is what we thought. Her things were still inside, so management sealed the room and contacted the county. Nathan touched the tag lightly. How long ago? Almost 3 weeks. The shepherd nudged the food closer to the door. Diane stared at the movement. "She has been bringing things here. Looks that way." Nathan asked for the guest's name. Diane hesitated, then said, "Evelyn Brooks." Older woman. Traveling alone. The dog's ears rose at the name. Nathan and Diane both noticed. He said it again, softer. Evelyn. The shepherd stood and pressed her nose to the bottom of the door. A quiet sound left her throat. Diane lowered the umbrella. That room is under county hold. I cannot open it without authorization. Nathan looked through the rain toward the office phone. Then call whoever can. Diane studied him. You were only staying one night. Nathan watched the dog settle beside the untouched food, her body curved toward the locked door. Plans change. Diane made the call from the office while Nathan stayed beside the shepherd. The rain softened to a steady mist, and the motel settled into the low mechanical sounds of night. The ice machine humming, a television murmuring behind a nearby wall, water ticking from the roof onto the metal railing. The dog did not move from room 17. She kept her body angled toward the door, her nose close to the narrow gap beneath it. Nathan placed the bowl of water beside her and sat against the wall. You have been waiting a long time, he said. Her ears shifted, but her eyes remained on the lock. 20 minutes later, a sheriff's cruiser entered the parking lot without lights or siren. Deputy Ryan Hale stepped out wearing a dark rain jacket over his uniform. He was in his early 30s, calm, clean-shaven, and carrying the tired expression of someone called into too many situations with incomplete information. Diane met him at the stairs and explained the room, the missing guest, and the key around the dog's neck. Ryan listened, then looked toward Maggie. You know the dog's name? Nathan asked. Not yet. She responded when Diane said Evelyn. Ryan glanced at the key tag. All right, let us see what she has been trying to show us. Diane unlocked the county seal with a small metal tool and slid a MasterCard through the reader. The electronic light flashed green, but the door did not open. Something inside blocked it. Nathan placed one hand against the frame. May I? Ryan nodded. Nathan pushed gently. The door moved 2 inches, then stopped against a suitcase lying on its side. He eased it wider until they could step through. The room smelled faintly of medicine, stale air, and fabric that had been shut away too long. Nothing appeared disturbed. A pair of women's shoes sat beside the bed. A tan coat hung across the back of a chair. On the nightstand, an open pill organizer rested beside a half-empty glass of water. The digital clock still glowed, blinking the wrong time. Maggie entered slowly. Her paws made almost no sound on the carpet. She searched the bathroom first, then beneath the bed, then behind the curtains. When she found no one, she returned to the chair near the window and lay down beside it. Her head rested on the floor beneath the hanging coat. Nathan watched her breathing change. Not relief. Recognition. She knows this room, Diane whispered. Ryan began documenting the scene. On the small table sat a dog bowl with a few dry pieces of food stuck to the bottom. Beside it lay a framed photograph, turned face down. Nathan lifted it carefully. The picture showed an older woman with silver hair standing beside a younger woman on a sunny front porch. Between them sat the same German shepherd, healthier than, wearing a bright red collar. On the back, someone had written, Evelyn, Rachel, and Maggie, Oklahoma City, last spring. Nathan looked toward the dog. Maggie. Her head rose at once. The name reached her differently than Evelyn had. She stood and came closer, pressing her nose to the photograph. Ryan opened the suitcase enough to check for identification. Inside were neatly folded clothes, a Bible, and an envelope addressed to Rachel Brooks. It had never been sealed. Nathan glanced at Ryan. Should we read it? Ryan nodded. Nathan unfolded the single page. The handwriting was uneven but clear. Rachel, I am sorry I let pride keep us apart. I am trying to come home. Maggie and I are on the way. Beneath the letter lay a bus schedule, a hospital bracelet with no admission date, and a handwritten note naming a clinic near Amarillo. Maggie lowered herself beside Nathan's boot. The room had not been abandoned. It had been interrupted, and somewhere beyond its locked door, the woman she had waited for had never made it back. Ryan photographed the letter, the hospital bracelet, and the clinic note before stepping into the hallway to make calls. Nathan remained inside with Maggie while Diane brought a clean blanket and a bowl of warm water from the office. The dog drank slowly this time. When Nathan placed a little food near her, she ate 2 small bites, then stopped and looked toward the open door. You still think she is coming back, he said. Maggie's ears lifted at the sound of footsteps outside, but only Ryan returned. He held a small notebook in one hand. The clinic never admitted Evelyn, he said. But they remember a call from the motel 3 weeks ago. A woman collapsed near the bus stop across the frontage road. Emergency medical services took her to Northwest Texas Hospital. Diane pressed her lips together. No one told us. The caller said she was alone. No identification was found on her. Nathan looked at the suitcase, the wallet still tucked beneath a folded sweater. Because everything was left here. Ryan nodded. The hospital registered her as an unidentified patient. She was transferred after 2 days to a rehabilitation center outside the city. Maggie stood when she heard Evelyn's name. Her body swayed, but she stayed upright. Nathan crouched beside her. She is alive? Ryan looked down at his notes. The records say she was alive at transfer. I am trying to confirm her current condition. The room became very still. Rain moved softly against the window. Diane sat on the edge of the second bed, staring at the floor. How did the dog end up back here? She asked. Ryan called the emergency dispatcher again and put the phone on speaker. A woman who had worked that night remembered the scene. Evelyn had been confused and weak when the ambulance arrived. Maggie had stayed beside her until the stretcher was moved. When the doors closed, the dog ran after the ambulance through the parking lot. A bus pulled in between them. By the time the driver looked back, Maggie was gone. So she came here, Nathan said. Diane nodded slowly. Back to the last place that still smelled like her. Ryan examined the brass key around Maggie's neck. A short length of red thread had been tied through the ring and looped beneath the collar. It was old and frayed, not something placed there recently. Evelyn may have attached this before they left the room, he said, in case Maggie got separated. Nathan touched the tag with one finger. Room 17. A number simple enough for anyone to understand, even if no one knew the story behind it. Ryan's phone rang. He answered, listened, then turned toward them. The rehabilitation center has her. Evelyn Brooks. She is stable, but she has trouble remembering names and phone numbers since the medical event. Maggie took one step toward him. Ryan's voice softened. They did not know she had family nearby, and they did not know about the dog. Nathan looked at the letter again. Rachel, I'm trying to come home. The words felt heavier now. What about the daughter? The address on the photograph is old. I have requested a records search. Maggie walked to the doorway, then back to the chair, uncertain which direction held Evelyn. Nathan saw the same question in her that had lived inside him for months. What if the person waiting for you is still reachable, but you left before finding out? Ryan gathered the documents. A veterinarian can examine Maggie tonight. After that, we will decide the safest way to reunite them. Nathan looked toward his truck through the rain. His room key rested in his pocket. His plan had been 5 hours of sleep and an early departure. Instead, he lifted the blanket around Maggie's shoulders and said, I am coming with you. The veterinary clinic sat 3 miles from the motel in a low brick building beside an all-night pharmacy. By the time Nathan carried Maggie through the front door, the rain had thinned to a mist and the eastern sky had begun to pale. Dr. Helen Moore met them in the examination room, wearing navy scrubs beneath a gray cardigan. She was gentle, efficient, and careful not to crowd the exhausted dog. Maggie weighed far less than she should have, but her heart was steady, her temperature was normal, and there were no signs of serious injury. She is dehydrated and badly underfed, Helen said, but she can recover. Nathan stood beside the table while Maggie rested her head against his forearm. How soon can she leave? Not yet. She needs fluids, small meals, and several hours of observation. Maggie lifted her head at the word leave and looked toward the door. Helen noticed. She is waiting for someone. Nathan looked down at the brass key still hanging from her collar. She has been doing that for 3 weeks. Ryan arrived with Evelyn's letter sealed inside a clear evidence sleeve and a printout from the county records office. He had found a current phone number for Rachel Brooks in Oklahoma City. I called twice, he said. No answer. I left a message identifying myself. Nathan stared at the number. The clinic's overhead light reflected across the plastic sleeve, making the words beneath it difficult to read. I am trying to come home. His own phone vibrated in his pocket. Daniel again. Nathan did not take it out. Helen connected the fluid line and settled Maggie on a warm blanket. The dog watched Nathan move toward the hallway. He stopped at the door. I am not leaving, he told her. Her eyes softened, but she continued to watch him. In the waiting room, a vending machine hummed beside a row of empty chairs. Nathan sat with Evelyn's letter in his hands. The paper trembled slightly, though he told himself it was from the cold. He remembered his mother's final week. 3 missed calls. 1 voicemail he had listened to only after she was gone. Her voice had been tired but ordinary. Nathan, call me when you can. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that warned him time had become short. He had carried those words longer than any order he had ever received. Ryan sat across from him. You do not have to make this call. Nathan looked at Rachel's number. Someone does. She may not believe you. Then I will read the letter. Ryan slid the clinic phone across the table. Nathan entered the number slowly. It rang 4 times. A woman answered, cautious and breathless. Hello. Nathan sat straighter. Is this Rachel Brooks? Who is asking? My name is Nathan Cole. I am calling from Amarillo, Texas. I am with a county deputy. Silence. Is this about my mother? The question came out smaller than the words around it. Nathan looked through the glass door toward Maggie. She had raised her head at the sound of his voice. Yes, he said. I think your mother has been trying to come home. Rachel did not speak. Nathan continued carefully, telling her about room 17, the letter, the hospital transfer, and the German shepherd who had waited outside the motel. When he said Maggie's name, Rachel drew in a sharp breath. Maggie is alive. She is weak, but the veterinarian says she will recover. Another silence followed, filled with distance, regret, and the faint sound of someone beginning to cry without wanting to be heard. My mother and I argued, Rachel said. She left before I could call her back. Nathan looked at Evelyn's handwriting. She was on her way to you. He read the letter aloud. When he finished, Rachel asked for the rehabilitation center's address. She said she would leave immediately. Nathan ended the call and sat without moving. His phone vibrated once more. This time he took it out. Daniel's name glowed on the screen. Nathan pressed answer. I am here, he said. Rachel reached Amarillo just after noon, having driven through the last of the rain with a small overnight bag on the passenger seat and both hands tight around the steering wheel. Nathan met her outside the rehabilitation center, where the clouds had begun to break over the flat Texas sky. She was 36, with tired brown eyes, dark hair pulled into a loose knot, and the guarded expression of someone who had rehearsed too many apologies without knowing whether she would ever get to say them. Ryan stood near the entrance with the necessary paperwork, while Dr. Helen Moore arrived a few minutes later in the clinic van with Maggie resting on a padded blanket in the back. The veterinarian had agreed to a short supervised visit because the German shepherd had responded well to fluids and food, but Maggie was still weak. Nathan opened the van door. Maggie lifted her head at once. The brass key had been removed from her collar for safekeeping, leaving only the faded red leather band around her neck. Rachel covered her mouth when she saw her. Oh, Maggie. The dog studied her for a moment, then gave one slow sweep of her tail against the blanket. Rachel knelt beside the van, but did not reach in. I am sorry, she whispered. Maggie leaned forward and pressed her nose to Rachel's hand. It was not forgiveness in any human sense. It was recognition. Enough to begin. Inside the rehabilitation center, the hallways were bright and quiet, carrying the clean scent of linen and floor polish. Wheels moved softly somewhere beyond the nurse's station. Nathan walked beside Maggie while Helen held the short lead. At the first intersection, a nurse pointed toward Evelyn's room. Maggie stopped before the nurse finished speaking. Her ears rose. She drew in the air once, then turned left. She knows, Helen said. Maggie moved slowly but with purpose, passing one doorway after another. Nathan watched her strength return with each step, as if the familiar scent ahead was pulling her beyond exhaustion. At room 214, she stopped. The door stood partly open. Rachel remained a few feet behind, suddenly unable to move. Nathan looked at her. You came this far. She nodded, though tears had already gathered in her eyes. Helen opened the door wider. Evelyn Brooks lay propped against white pillows near the window, smaller than she appeared in the photograph, her silver hair brushed neatly away from her face. For a second, she looked only at Nathan. Then Maggie stepped into the room. Her nails made a soft rhythm against the floor. Evelyn's eyes widened. Maggie. The German shepherd froze just inside the doorway. Her body trembled, not from weakness now, but from the fear that hope might vanish if she moved too quickly. Evelyn lifted one hand from the blanket. Come here, girl. Maggie crossed the room and placed her head beneath Evelyn's palm. The older woman closed her fingers gently against the fur between Maggie's ears. A long breath left her, carrying 3 weeks of confusion and waiting with it. Rachel entered slowly. Evelyn looked up and stared at her daughter as if trying to bring a distant memory into focus. "You came," she said. Rachel moved to the bedside and took her mother's free hand. "You were coming back." Evelyn's eyes filled. "I never stopped trying." Maggie settled between them, her head still resting on the mattress. Nathan stood near the door, silent. The words reached him with unexpected force. He thought of Daniel's voice on the phone that morning, surprised but warm when Nathan finally answered. He thought of the road east, the house waiting in North Carolina, and the cardboard box still unopened in his truck. Rachel bent over her mother's hand. Evelyn rested the other on Maggie's head. No one offered a speech. No one needed one. The room held only the sound of quiet breathing and the soft rainwater still slipping from the roof outside. Nathan stepped into the hallway and took out his phone. He called Daniel again. "I am still coming home," he said. This time, it was not a promise made to ease the moment. It was a direction. The reunion did not erase the lost weeks, but it changed the way each of them carried them. Rachel stayed at the rehabilitation center through the afternoon, helping a nurse adjust Evelyn's blanket and answering questions about medications, insurance, and the long drive back to Oklahoma City. Maggie remained beside the bed, resting on a folded towel with her nose angled toward Evelyn's hand. Every few minutes, the older woman touched the dog's head as if confirming she was still there. Nathan stood near the window, watching sunlight move across the wet parking lot. He had spent years believing that returning too late meant there was no point in returning at all. In that room, he saw something different. Rachel had missed calls, misunderstood silence, and allowed pride to harden into distance. Evelyn had left without finding the right words. Maggie had been separated by confusion no one intended. None of them could change what happened, yet all three were still here. That mattered. A nurse brought Maggie a shallow bowl of water and a small portion of food. The German shepherd ate slowly, pausing often to look toward Evelyn. Rachel noticed. "She always did that," she said. She would not finish dinner until Mom sat down. Evelyn smiled faintly. She believed meals were family business. The words brought a soft laugh from Rachel, the first Nathan had heard from her. It was brief, but it loosened the room. Ryan arrived with the recovered suitcase, the photograph, and Evelyn's letter secured in a folder. He placed them on the table without ceremony. "The county has closed the missing person report," he said. "The motel room can be released once the remaining property is collected." Rachel took the letter and looked at her mother. "You wrote this for me." Evelyn studied the handwriting as though it belonged to someone she almost remembered. "I was afraid you would not read it." Rachel sat beside her. "I was afraid you would never send it." For a moment, neither woman moved. Then Rachel reached across the blanket and took her mother's hand. "You were coming back." Evelyn's eyes filled, but her voice remained clear. "I never stopped trying." Maggie shifted closer until her body rested against both the bed and Rachel's chair, connecting them in the quiet space between apology and forgiveness. Nathan stepped into the hallway and called Daniel. His brother answered on the second ring. "You still in Texas?" "For a little while." "You sound different." Nathan looked through the glass panel at Maggie between the two women. "I stopped somewhere." Daniel waited. Nathan had always admired that about him. He knew when not to fill silence. "I should have called sooner," Nathan said. "I should have come home sooner." Daniel let out a slow breath. "You can still come home now." The sentence struck deeper than Nathan expected. No accusation. No accounting of months. Just a door left open. "I am on my way," Nathan said. "There is a box in the truck I have been afraid to open. We will open it together." Nathan closed his eyes for a second. "All right." When he returned to the room, Rachel was arranging to take Evelyn home after discharge. Helen had approved Maggie for continued recovery with a careful feeding schedule and regular veterinary visits. Rachel looked at Nathan. "You brought us back together." Nathan shook his head and glanced at Maggie. "She did. I just followed the key." Evelyn reached for the brass motel key, now resting on the table inside a small evidence envelope. She held it for a moment, then placed it in Nathan's hand. "Then maybe it was meant to bring you somewhere too." Nathan looked down at the worn red tag marked 17. For the first time since leaving California, the road ahead did not feel like an escape. It felt like a return. 3 weeks later, the Desert Star Motel looked smaller in the clear morning light. The red neon sign was dark, the rain had dried from the pavement, and a warm Texas wind moved dust along the edge of the parking lot. Nathan pulled in beside the office on his way east. He had already driven Evelyn and Rachel's remaining belongings to a shipping center, spoken with Daniel twice, and finally opened the cardboard box from his mother's house. Inside were photographs, recipe cards, a church bulletin, and a note in her handwriting telling both sons not to let grief turn them into strangers. Nathan had read it once. Then again, he kept it folded in the glove compartment. Diane stepped out of the office, carrying a paper cup of coffee. "I thought you would be halfway to North Carolina by now," she said. "I was." Nathan looked toward the second-floor walkway. Room 17 had been cleaned and reopened. The porch light no longer flickered. "I needed to stop once more." Diane nodded as if she understood. She handed him a small envelope. "Rachel mailed this here for you." Inside was a photograph taken on Evelyn's first morning at Rachel's home in Oklahoma City. Evelyn sat on a shaded porch beneath a blue blanket, looking stronger than she had in the rehabilitation center. Maggie lay beside her chair, her black and tan coat brushed clean, her body beginning to fill out again. Rachel stood behind them with one hand on her mother's shoulder. On the back, she had written, "Everyone made it home." Nathan held the photograph for a long moment. "She is eating well," Diane said. "Rachel calls every few days." Says Maggie waits until Evelyn sits down before touching her food. Nathan smiled. "Family business." Diane looked at the brass key hanging beside his dog tags from the rearview mirror. The red tag marked 17 caught the sunlight. "You kept it." "Evelyn gave it to me." "Does it still open the room?" "Not anymore." Diane glanced toward the stairs. Maybe it was never meant to stay useful in the usual way. Nathan placed the photograph on the dashboard. Before leaving, he walked to room 17 and stood outside the door. There was no dog waiting there now. No untouched food. No frightened breathing behind the rain. Only a clean walkway, a closed curtain, and the ordinary sound of a vacuum moving in the room below. He rested one hand against the railing and looked out across the highway. Weeks earlier, he had arrived believing every stop was temporary. Now he understood that some places held you only long enough to change your direction. He returned to the truck and called Daniel before starting the engine. "How far out are you?" Daniel asked. 2 days, maybe less. "The house is still here." Nathan looked at the key, the dog tags, and the photograph. "So am I." The words came easier than he expected. He pulled onto the frontage road and turned east. The panhandle opened before him under a wide blue sky. For the first time, he did not measure the road by how far it carried him from the past. He measured it by how much closer it brought him to home. In Oklahoma City, Maggie slept beside Evelyn's chair while Rachel read the letter aloud one more time. In North Carolina, Daniel opened the windows of their mother's house and let fresh air into rooms that had been closed too long. And somewhere between those places, a former Marine drove with an old motel key swinging beside his dog tags, carrying proof that even after doors close, mercy sometimes leaves one unlocked.